Since I was a little kid, I was constantly having multidimensional experiences that had a lot to do with this planet and seeing into the future and the past of this planet. And you and me, we were born into the samsara, into the reincarnation cycle, into the false matrix. So, really, mostly all we had around us was the false matrix. But deep within us, there was the truth. And the truth is the one and only truth, and that is always divine self. For many people, if not all of us, probably, we adopted the false self and probably forgot much about the divine self. But the divine self never goes anywhere, even when we forget. But something quite miraculous happened in 2020, when I think for all of us on this path, the divine self became the big boss like never before. It was the end of reincarnation, end of the wheel of karma, and the beginning of the end of samsara. The end of samsara with the stamp on it actually has just happened, and it was a process that culminated on 11/11 last year, then came to another huge breakthrough on December 21st, solstice, and then finally, during this spring equinox, was completely finished. So we are now emerging from this big illusion, and so we go back to remembering maybe when we were little kids and we had some of these multidimensional experiences. Why were we having experiences about the whole planet? What is up with this planet? Why is it all about her and not so much about our individual self? It is because she was destined to be saved. Salvation of this planet is really our big mission. Once upon a time, this planet used to be a very perfect planet where the beings of light, the beings of rainbow light, were having a wonderful time without time. And we were simply fulfilling our destiny of playing with light, learning to be creator beings, to create with light, to get to know energy, to be responsible, of course. Who would not want to be responsible in the field of creation? And then, because we are part of a much bigger world, we call it cosmos. And within cosmos, we have even smaller worlds called universes. So it happened within this cosmic cycle that evil was also in existence along with a lot of light. Very small percentage of what we call evil and a huge percentage of the light. And so what happens when you have a little bit of dirt and a lot of light? Well, instead of all light, some things become a little gray and some things become very black. And so a little bit of this dirt ended up on this beautiful planet of light. And because the dirt became so overwhelming, it actually became the dominant color in this world. And so we've had this purification process going on here for so long since that event that we call the fall. The fall was when our earth actually separated almost completely from the web of life, but not completely, because nothing can actually completely be separate. So we were hanging on a very thin thread. And when we were coming here to this planet, something quite different happened here with the design of reality. So originally our reality was designed to be freedom, complete freedom, but not the way that we think about it now. It was freedom because we were always based in goodness. And so in our goodness, our creations were also based in goodness. They were charged with love, charged with goodwill, charged with divine will. So divine will was completely known by us, and we always created along the principles of divine will. We could see divine will. So, what happened then, through many different events that took place on planet Earth, is that our body was degraded. And it was degraded by those beings that originated in the evil frequency. They wanted to create a world just for themselves, based in complete hunger for power, desire for power, for selfishness, very selfish, self centered, anything that we associate with that. And one of these beings is called the beast. We got to know this being as the beast of Babylon, and as several other beings that we knew as even the big boss of darkness, Satan. So many different layers of these dark beings. The same way that the hierarchy of the light works. So you have the hierarchy of the light, you have all the angels, the archangels, you have the Elohim, you have the creator mother, creator father. So even though the beings of light are the vast majority, and now really it will be just the beings of light after this process is complete, then there would be that small fraction of these beings of darkness. And so they would have the same hierarchy, the big boss, the smaller boss, and so on and so on. And the different lords of darkness and princes of darkness, and they would take on different forms in this creation. There are so many different ones that belong to this group. And for example, the Dracos, one of them, the reptilian beings, the demonic beings, and so on and so on. But from the get-go, they would never overwhelm this creation. They could only take a little piece of it and try to play their little selfish game where they would want to be the dictators. So, dictatorships actually that originated then on planet Earth were always a reflection of actually the nature of these beings. The wars we've had on this planet always originated as an impulse from these beings that very often didn't even incarnate on planet Earth. They didn't have to have an incarnation on planet Earth. They could work from these interdimensional spaces around the Earth. So that was actually how the false matrix worked. But it needed energy. When you have a closed system that really is just very through the thread connected to the divine reality, when you have this closed system, you need a lot of energy because you don't have freedom. You don't have the free energy that comes from cosmos. Because in cosmos, energy is always free because it flows through all of creation freely. All of creation, when it is in an open system, is actually sustained by the love of God and the light of God. So when you have these beings of darkness who don't want to have, the big boss, the mother god and the father god, and they want to create their own little big boss, who would be then, as we know him, the being of darkness. So then they have this little world and they don't have free energy. They have to create energy by themselves. And so then they start to create these corrupted systems that need to trap the spark that comes when a being enters a world. So you and me, the beings of the light, when we enter a world, we bring the light of God with us. At least a spark. We are always shining stars. But then if they have a system that confuses beings and makes them so confused that they suddenly lose identity with the divine self and instead believe a lie, that they are mortal, that they are the body, that they are the face, that they are the person. So that's a big lie. When Issa, our Jesus, our uncle, our brother, our father, when he met Satan, what did he say? He said, Satan is a liar. And he said, get behind me, Satan. And that is actually what is needed from us too. But luckily, this is the end of the setup. But the lie was, what the biggest lie was that we are mortal and that what we have thought we were was the truth. That was the biggest lie. The one and only truth is that we are divine beings who are completely free, and that we are not mortal, and that we are not this body, that we are also not this mind, and we are none of the things that we call identity or personal identity. The thing is, just like we came from the big being which is called God, our divine mother, father, God, and we are fractals of the divine, that means our divine self is always a fractal of the divine. If you took the big sun and you call that God, and you made little stars from that big sun, then that is our divine self. That means a fractal of the divine. But the same thing was happening with the beast. The beast also fractalized. And guess what? And I know some of you already figured this out because you told me that the fractal of the beast became what we call the ego. It is not a fragment of our own divine personality. It is actually a fragment of the beast. And so some people, well, let's put it like this. I think all people receive the fractal of the beast. And for some people, they allowed it to grow. Some people allowed it to become very big within them. And the mystics tried not to get infected by the beast, of course. Some managed, many also did not manage. So we found then corruption among even, the teachers, the gurus, the priests, who knows what. It's because the fractal of the beast became too big within them and started to take over their divine nature. And for some people, we would say they have a small ego, but even a small ego is a small fractal of the beast. So every single person who entered this world as the divine spark, by the age of, I think usually the way that I was able to see this, thanks to Divine Mother, by the end of our childhood, the fractal of the beast tried to be very much dominant energy. So I would say teenagers kind of, and it worked through the hormones too. It worked through the body. And so it really possessed our physicality. And then it is true that the body often would completely become what we called in religions a sinner. But it was not the original nature. The original nature was never sin. The original nature was our divine nature. But trapped in the false matrix, in the samsara, this to me is the true mark of the beast, and it is the little fractal of the little devil sitting on our shoulder, integrating into our psychology. And, it always happened after the end of childhood. It started to integrate during childhood. And for some people, it would happen faster, for some people, slower. But that is also the reason why our uncle Issa Jesus said, "Be like children to enter the kingdom of heaven," because he knew that everybody was possessed, basically. And this possession was not exactly what people think it is. Because, when we say possession, we say, oh, this person has demonic possession, this person has entity. This was very different. This was actually the integration of the fractal of the beast into our system so that it could operate us, so that it could operate through the body, so that it too became like the beast, but it could never ever kill the spark in anyone. So, it's a very complex process, but this is what actually happened. And this happened in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, when we lost our light body, it was because of this fractal of the beast that kind of tricked the light humanity, because we were light humanity, and it tricked the human avatar. It tricked, it's a little bit like the movie Avatar, actually, to be honest, if you've seen the Avatar. It tricked our body elemental even, and we innocently wanted to actually serve. We innocently agreed. We innocently allowed it because we didn't think it would overwhelm us. And the other thing is, we didn't think it was going to be so permanent. We thought that we were of service when it happened for the first time. But it, of course, completely overwhelmed us because when you have the beast trying to use the human body to suddenly have senses that become addictive, and the beast is really the father of all abuse, the father of all addictions, the father of all misuse at every level in our human history. Violence, abuse, addictions, even the sexuality that we know today and the way it has been misused, it's all the result of the beast. So the beast has been very dominant in the history that we are aware of, but this goes beyond it. So now we had a little problem because the beast suddenly was operating through the human body and was making the body to be the harboring vehicle for these ill-intended energies, these misusing energies. So that's why all the mystics in our known history, what did they do? They could tell something was wrong, so they tried all the different ways to get rid of this possession, really. They tried through meditation, fasting, abstinence, all the things that you can imagine, poverty, and all of it was just an attempt to get rid of this fractal of the beast. And we started to call it ego. And then we started to get these false teachings, which would just be telling us, oh, it's just your ego, and this is person's ego. But that made it our own. It was like a story that tells us, for example, that reincarnation is how it's always going to be and how it's always been. Saying, oh, yeah, it's just how it goes. That's normal. And it's not normal. It's actually not natural. So I would not call it ego just because it seems like that is actually the trait of our personality. But of course, if we make it our own, then we don't know that we are actually, possessed. But I don't want to say like possession either, because it was much more about integration. It wanted to be not known, not seen, so that nobody really knows, except, of course, for the mystics who knew, and then they tried so hard to get rid of it. The mind that developed, the constant thinking, the fear, the aging, the pain. We never used to know those things. We never knew pain as beings of light. We never knew aging. We never knew hunger. We never knew money. We didn't know war. We didn't know any of it. All of it came with the beast. So this is the time of revelation. This will be known to humanity, and all of us have been massively liberated since 2020. In 2020, it was actually all about liberating the physical vehicle, the physical body, but also our earthly bodies from this possession, from this dirt, from the darkness. And again, like let's say that you are a really good person, but so this possession, this integration of the beast, maybe took 1% real estate in us. And I would say maybe more, right? Because we all ended up looking in the mirror and pointing at each other, and we felt this separation, but the separation came from the beast too, because the divine self is always based in oneness, and yet we can be many. So it's many beings in love, many beings in oneness. That's the divine self. But again, the beast could never kill the spark. That's why the light of God is always victorious, and the only thing that the beast could do is confuse us and make us forget. So let's say that we had some kind of real estate within us, and that's 100% of our being. So let's say that 100% of our being is us. So the beast Sometimes took 5%, sometimes 20, sometimes 90, sometimes 99, but it could never take the spark. But it could trap the spark, and that's exactly what it did. Thanks to the beast, we had to go onto the wheel that we call karma and incarnation, which is not our true nature. So when someone managed to enter this world and remain in 100% divine self, we would call them an avatar. And Yogananda, for example, was one of those. Issa, Jesus, was one of those. Ananda Mai, just to name some women that we've had around us here recently, the Blissful Mother, and of course many others. But you know, even if it had 1% of real estate inside a person, it is still too much, isn't it? Because who wants 1%? But that's probably what happened to all of us. But the ones who managed to stay completely clean and clear, like Yogananda, then they were 100% always in the divine self. And then we called it temptation. Temptation was not what people think it is. It's much bigger than that. Of course, the beast always operates through temptation. And the temptation is very clear because the beast operates like the biggest ego that can possibly exist. And if you imagine the ego with everything that the ego is, think about what we hate about people who are abusive. When you look at them and they are abusing life, when they are, killing and exploiting and all of it, we all probably say that's so horrible. And that is 100% the beast. Everything that we find so unreasonable and against life, that is the beast. So the beast is the 100% real estate of what we call ego. There is no divine spark in the beast. It's 100%. So it's so concentrated. And when we look at it, we simply, it has all that we would say is corrupt. All the wars, all the money, all the greed, all the sex and everything, that is the beast. So the beast operates at 100% of what we would call then ego. It doesn't have a filter. And so this is the end times of the beast as well. It was the beast who invented money. It was the beast who invented the monetary system. It was the beast who invented also wars. And then would be splitting people into two groups, ideally, and always two groups that then would go into war against each other. It was manipulating through the fragments within people towards conflict and war, and the beast would delight in that, because it's obviously at 100%, we would call it a very sick being. So who can delight in the suffering of others? Only the beast and those who got so inflicted by the beast. So this is the return to our innocence. This is the final purification at our physical, etheric, mental, and emotional level. That means we will again belong 100% to our I Am Presence. All that was possessed within us in the past is returning to the light of the divine self, and illusion is ending within us. And the illusion, of course, is much bigger than anyone can imagine. Everything within the samsara has been an illusion, and we will be entering true divine reality, which operates again like the old earth used to. And I don't want to say old earth because we actually call old earth the samsara and the illusion. So Mu, when the earth was Maravati, when she was the original earth, when she was a creation of light, and when everything was freely given to humanity, and we didn't have a monetary system, and we didn't experience things like suffering, pain, dying, or hunger, or money. But we did have an incredible mission. Our mission, and that will happen again, is to create a planetary civilization. but without the governments, without the systems that we've had. And that is the big vision for humanity once again, to be part of a civilization of the golden age, civilization of light, without any interference from these forces that actually have lost. So this is the end of these forces. Wow, isn't that exciting? And I know that sometimes, it's too much. It's like, come on, we've lived our life like this. I can't even imagine it. Surely that can be. But the thing is that it will be revealed to us what interference humanity actually experienced in this false reality that was created by the beings who were centered in selfishness and greed, and all they ever wanted is, it's mine. And then, of course, you saw it even, somebody told me the other day, but look at kids when they are in kindergarten and they start so early and they start fighting, and it's mine and I don't want to share it. But all of it was the fractal of the beast. So that is now releasing. And maybe you've experienced big changes within your own consciousness since 2020. I would be surprised if some of us could say, nothing has changed for me since 2020. I don't think it's even possible. Because, yes, we have always been part of divine reality until we became trapped. And the way the trapped worked, it worked like a pull. It was a very big pull. It was such a big pull that we even call it gravity. It was pulling these beings of light, these beings of divine spark into this trap. And then it was creating this electromagnetic grid that would be trapping the light of God in us, in this world, and giving us the false identity. The liar gave us our lives and said, this is your life, this birth and the death, that's your life. That was the big lie. And imagine what a big stretch it is to be returning to divine reality, where we do not experience birth, when we do not experience death, where we have bodies that don't need anything because they always thrive, because they are made of light. And then we can go and play freely in so many different realities. We can visit, we have the freedom of movement, and we don't experience any physical pain. That's a big, big difference. So in our religions, right, then they split this and they said, okay, this is heaven. That's where you go after death. There is hell. And then there is your life on planet Earth. But that too is a lie. In a way, in divine reality, everything is what we would call heaven. There is no separation. And we never went to heaven when we died. We just went to the fourth dimension in the astral sphere, where we still had this electromagnetic field, which determined that we have to embody again. And it was not even called embodiment, it was called reincarnation, coming back into flesh. So we were constantly coming back into flesh. So that's the big, big difference now. It could not be a bigger difference. And in this ascension process, it is liberation from the lie. It is liberation from this, again, integration of this fractal from the beast. And we, in the past, right, think about it this way. If you were part of some religion or part of some mystical tradition, part of any esoteric traditions, what did it require? Massive discipline, constant discipline. Don't give in to temptation. And why? Well, originally it made sense because they were trying not to give power to the beast. They didn't want people to fall for the traps, but the traps were everywhere. The trap was absolutely everywhere, and it became almost impossible not to fall for the trap of the beast. Whether it was money, jobs, you know, um, our food, even the way that we started to feel hungry and we needed to eat and we would starve without food. And yet the mystics could prove that they can go completely without food, and many of them were living on the light, but that was so rare. So right now, this is the biggest liberation of humanity from all these traps. Isn't that incredible? So the discipline that it required, which very few could do it, very few could do it. Yogananda was incredibly actually disciplined, and it's nice to look at the ones who made it, because the ones who made it, but again, this will be a different time for us. I think this is the easiest time to be alive, switching gears from the old into the new. But in the past, it was very hard. And because everybody, almost everybody, became trapped through desire, through attachment, they were coming back again and again and again and again. And that's why it was the number one goal of all the real mystics, was to end reincarnation. They wanted to end coming back into a false world. They wanted to be free in the divine reality. So this is really incredible. And when you look at Yogananda, it's funny to read about his approach to this false world, because he thought, when you came into a false world, you forget a lot. Then you had to do so much to uncover your true memory. You had to do so much, and very few people were willing to put in the effort. So he was saying things like, meditate 3 hours a day. And, people were like, oh no, 3 hours a day, complete silence, I can't stop my mind. But the thing is that he knew that we were in a trap. And the longer he existed in this world and the more he meditated, the more he was able to uncover the different layers of control that existed in this world. So when you look at one of his incredible writings, like The Second Coming of Christ, he actually says that he didn't think, for example, that Satan was real. He thought that maybe it's just some kind of metaphor for some kind of energy, but he didn't think it was a real being until he was liberated. And he said, every mystic who becomes liberated, which means escapes the false trap, will encounter Satan and will realize it's a real being and it's more real than anyone can imagine. So again, coming back to Yogananda, who was one of the few who managed to escape, and we then call them ascended masters. What is an ascended master? Anyone who managed to escape the false matrix. They were able to go beyond it. And so we have to look at how they did it. But again, this is the end of the false matrix. It actually ended, and now it's just all of us will become those ascended beings, which means just free again. That's all. Yes, this false matrix, and I'm going to explain a little bit how it worked. It was such an incredible, deliberately, I would say, exhausting system, trying to exhaust all of us through pain, through suffering, through desire. And the system was created in terms of polarity. It took some kind of original divine idea for this world and twisted it all to actually be based in evil. It twisted all the divine ideals for this world, and it screwed them a little bit so that they are not working the way that they intended to be, but it took them and twisted them in a way that they all become a trap. So instead of beautiful divine polarity that exists within creation, it created duality. And it created the duality to be a trap. Isn't that crazy? Instead of the principle of the spiral, which is the spiral of ascension, it created the wheel. So it took the spiral and turned it into a wheel, which means always coming back and recycling. So that's exactly what it did. And so it created likes and dislikes. So what we think is so normal was created by the false matrix and the designers of it, the likes and the dislikes. It created suffering, but because it created duality, it also created pleasure. And then you can imagine the trap was so unbelievably um, I'm looking for a word for it, because what a trap. That really is some kind of engineering. So when you create a world in which you offer suffering as something that nobody will enjoy, and then you offer pleasure as something everyone will seek, then you will create lack, and you will create what people would call then wealth. I don't want to call it abundance because that's not true divine abundance, but it's wealth. Then you would create war, you would create separation, you would create countries, you would create boundaries, you would create nationalities, you would create sexism, you would create racism, and you have it. Yeah. So all of this was designed to be part of the false matrix so that it can create, hatred and all of it. So now, as we are liberated and liberating, it's good to know that all of these things belong to the false matrix. So let's recognize them for what they are and move beyond into the new world that is emerging here and will be our true divine reality. So I'm going to spend maybe the next 5 minutes describing the true divine reality. I think many of us here, we came here for this lifetime with incredible equipment. This was not a lifetime where we could just enter here in this body and enjoy our life the way that the false matrix wanted us to. The false matrix wanted everyone to fall asleep and never ever remember the truth of our divine being. It tried so hard so that no one remembers their true divine nature. So in this lifetime, our conditions that we entered into this world, I would say, were designed specifically by us, by our own soul, by our own divine self, so that we stay awake. Even if a little bit awake, we had to stay awake. And if we fell asleep, we had to wake up. So this is the lifetime like nothing else. And we will never have a lifetime like this again, because now we're stepping into eternal life again. In the divine reality, how things work, they are much more fluid. Here, everything became so dense and so frozen. Light froze here to create this reality that became matter. But now we're returning to the world of the spirit, which is eternal. That's a good start. And within the eternal world of spirit, all is made of light. But the light creates form, and that form is a light form. So we still will see temples, we will still see healing gardens, we will see beautiful planets, we will see much more of this cosmos than we have ever seen. And our, what we call heavens, will become the one and only reality. Divine reality is where we create with our higher mind, so all light responds to the mind. So we don't have to work, we don't have to earn, we don't have to buy. All those systems were created by the false matrix. Instead, we are creator beings. Creator beings don't earn money, creator beings don't pay money. Creator beings have the gift of the higher mind to give form to light. So we will again learn how to create with light and to have the freedom to constantly improve upon it, not to be stuck with it. So let's say we create some beautiful meditation garden on our own planet, and then we will sit in that garden and meditate. We will enjoy it, we will delight in it, and we will have an idea, oh, I can improve upon this. And so we will use our mind to again improve upon it. So it's going to be a world of constant creation. We will be doing something called embodiment instead of reincarnation. We will be embodying in different versions of a light body depending on what experience we want to have. And we will be free to come and free to go, and no longer will there be need for the process of birth and death. Both were introduced by the false matrix. It is so, inefficient to have to be born, depend on some parents, and then to go through a process of deterioration until we die in a very sad way, usually. So, all of that will no longer exist. We will be embodying in forms of light. We will be delighting in our experiences. And if we feel like we are graduating, because it's always going to be a graduation, which means ascension, and it will be something that we are fully aware of, nothing like here, people don't know when they're going to die. It will be constant expansion into more through bliss, through joy, through love, and suffering will cease to exist. Illness, pain will cease to exist. Our dependence on food and money and housing will cease to exist. Because in the world of divine reality, everyone is free. And nobody pays Shiva, nobody pays Shakti. Wouldn't that be funny? And so we are entering a really blissful world together. And so it is. So now in our ascension process, we are still cleaning up the dirt here that exists within us, within our brothers and sisters that we call the beast, whether it is a fractal and a small percentage or a big percentage, whatever took over a person now is being cleared and cleaned. And so the goddess Chamunda is supporting us incredibly right now. And maybe if you can, please every day invoke her until the job is done. Because right now we are unstoppable, truly unstoppable. And even though there are still beings here in this world who carry the beast fractal in them, and you can definitely tell because we call it ego. So if you want to call it ego, because it sounds nicer, but I want to call it by its real name. So there are beings in this world who still carry the beast within them. And so now is the time of great purification. And our Chamunda, she's here to take care of this big mission. So every day, Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaya Viche, the mantra to invoke Chamunda and to give her even our own support in her mission. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful Yogananda's family worship the goddess Chamundi. Really, Sean? No way. So, Chamunda and Chamundi is the same thing. They just called her different things. So I have to look it up because that's pretty amazing because she is coming. So welcome, Chamunda. So thank you so much and many blessings.